Hello, dear. I'm Grandma Ruth, and I have to tell you about the time I came home from a big sale at the market with 4 whole bunches of bananas tucked under my arm, more than any one household could possibly eat before they turned soft and spotty and sad sitting there on the counter. The kind of impulse buy that seems perfectly sensible standing in the store, and considerably less sensible once you're staring at the whole pile of them spread across your kitchen table. My husband took one look at that haul and asked me plainly what in the world I intended to do with them all before they went to waste. And truth be told, at that moment, I didn't have much of an answer for him. Well, I'm going to show you exactly what I did that week. The same method my own mother used long before refrigerators were sitting in every kitchen as a matter of course. Back when keeping food from spoiling took a good deal more thought and patience than simply opening a door and setting something inside, and it's the reason I can buy bananas on sale without a single worry today, knowing full well I'll use every last one of them before they ever go bad on me. I like to think of it in stages, almost like following a bunch of bananas through their whole life in my kitchen, from the day they come home with me right through to the very last spoonful of banana bread batter a full month later. Each stage building on the one before it. So let's walk through it together, one stage at a time, just the way I've been doing it for more years now than I can easily count. The very first thing to understand, right from the moment you carry those bananas through your own front door, is that bananas don't ripen the way most fruit does, sitting quietly and slowly turning sweet all on their own, without much fuss at all. Bananas produce a good deal of ethylene gas, especially right at the stem, that little cluster where all the bananas connect to one another and to whatever's left of the plant they grew on, and that gas is exactly what pushes ripening along faster and faster the longer it's allowed to collect and build up in one place, unable to drift away and dissipate. Understanding that one simple fact is really the whole key to everything I'm about to show you. Because every single stage of this method comes down to controlling that gas, either slowing it down when you want your bananas to last a good long while, or letting it do its work when you're finally ready for them to ripen up and be eaten. Stage 1, and this covers roughly the first week you've got your bananas home, is all about the stem, the single most important part of this whole method, and the one step you'll want to be sure never to skip. The very moment you get your bananas home, before you even put the kettle on or set your groceries away, separate them from the bunch, pulling each one gently away from its neighbors so they're no longer clustered together at that stem the way they came from the store. This alone slows ripening down noticeably, since a whole bunch clustered together concentrates all that ethylene gas in one tight spot, hurrying every single banana along together, rather than letting each one ripen at its own more leisurely pace, one at a time as it's meant to. Once they're separated, take a small piece of plastic wrap and wrap it snugly around the very tip of each stem. Just that little brown or green knob at the top of each individual banana, pressing it down firmly so it seals tight against the fruit, with no gaps left for that gas to escape through. That gas I mentioned escapes mostly through the stem, and sealing it off with plastic traps a good deal of it right there, instead of letting it drift freely around the whole banana, slowing the ripening process down by a good number of days compared to bananas left with their stems exposed to the open air on your counter, sitting there unprotected against every bit of that gas escaping and hurrying the whole bunch along together. My own mother used a bit of damp cloth tied round the stem before plastic wrap ever existed in anybody's kitchen, wrapping it snug the very same way and checking it every so often to keep it from drying out, and it worked nearly as well, though I'll admit the plastic wrap does a slightly tidier job of it and doesn't need redampening every day or two the way her cloth did. One less small chore to remember in an already busy week. Along with wrapping the stems, find your bananas a proper spot to sit for this first week. Somewhere cool and out of direct sunlight. But not the refrigerator just yet. We'll get to that stage a bit later on, and I don't want you jumping ahead of yourself. A pantry shelf or a spot on the counter well away from your stove and any other heat works nicely, since warmth speeds ripening along just as surely as that ethylene gas does. And the two working together will run right past that patient first week you're aiming for. And here's something folks miss constantly. Keep your bananas well away from other fruit during this stage, especially apples, avocados, and tomatoes, since all of those give off a fair bit of ethylene gas themselves, and sitting near your bananas, they'll speed the ripening along a good deal faster than you're after during this first careful week, undoing half the good your stem wrapping was meant to do, no matter how carefully you sealed each one. I like to keep a separate little basket set well apart from my main fruit bowl, just for this purpose. So there's never any question of the two groups accidentally mingling together on a busy morning. Stage 2 carries you through roughly the second week, and this is where you'll want to start paying closer attention to how your bananas are coming along, since not every banana in your batch will ripen at exactly the same pace, even with the very same care given to each one, some naturally running a day or two ahead of the others regardless of anything you do. Check on them every day or two, and as soon as you notice one turning fully yellow with just the faintest speckling of brown starting to show, pull that one aside from the others right away, rather than leaving it sitting in the same spot, no matter how small the difference might look to you at first glance. A banana that's reached its peak ripeness is now itself giving off more ethylene than the greener ones sitting nearby. So keeping a ripe one mixed in with your still green stalk will speed those others along faster than you'd like, working against everything you did back in stage 1 to slow things down in the first place, undoing that careful separation before you even realize what's happened. Eat the ripe ones as they come, enjoying them at their very best while that flavor's at its peak, or set them aside for the fridge stage we're coming to shortly, while your greener bananas continue along at their own slower pace, still protected by that plastic-wrapped stem, doing its quiet work the whole while, unhurried and patient exactly as you want them to be. Now, stage 3, moving into roughly the third week, and this is the part that surprises folks most of all: the fridge. I know it sounds backward, since most of us grew up hearing that bananas don't belong in the refrigerator under any circumstances, passed down as one of those kitchen rules nobody ever thinks to question. And that's not entirely wrong, but it's not the whole truth either. And there's an important bit of nuance most folks never hear about. Once a banana has reached the ripeness you actually want to eat it at, that lovely full yellow with just a few brown flecks starting to show, move it into the refrigerator rather than leaving it out to keep ripening past that perfect point. The cold slows the ripening process down dramatically at that point, buying you a good many extra days, sometimes a full week or more, before that banana would otherwise turn soft and overripe sitting out on the counter in the open air. Now here's the part that trips folks up and stops them from trying it in the first place. The very reason most people never give this a chance. The skin will turn a good deal darker in the fridge, sometimes nearly black within a day or two, and it looks for all the world like the banana's gone bad. The sort of thing that would make anyone hesitate before reaching for it. But peel back that dark skin, and you'll find the fruit inside just as pale, firm, and sweet as the day you put it in there, completely unaffected by what's happening on the outside of the peel. That blackened skin is simply the cold reacting with compounds right at the surface. Nothing more. And it has nothing whatsoever to do with the quality of the fruit sitting underneath it. Protected and perfectly fine the whole while, insulated from the very changes happening on the peel just outside it. I've had folks turn their nose up at a blackened banana from my own refrigerator, certain I was about to serve them something spoiled, right up until they tasted it themselves and found it every bit as good as one fresh off the counter, if not better for having stayed cold and firm a good while longer. Holding its texture in a way a banana left out on the counter simply can't manage past a certain point. And now we come to stage 4, the final stretch that carries you all the way out to that full month. And this stage belongs to your freezer. By the time you're 3 weeks in, you'll likely have a banana or two that have moved past that perfect eating stage, gotten a bit too soft and spotted for eating out of hand, the kind you might otherwise be tempted to toss out with a bit of guilt over the waste, standing there over the trash bin telling yourself it's just one banana. No great loss. Don't you dare throw them away, not a single one. Peel them first, every one of them, since a banana peel turns to an awful rubbery mess if you try to freeze it still attached, sticking to the fruit and making a real chore of it later when you're trying to use it. And then either freeze them whole, tucked into a freezer bag with the air pressed out as best you can manage, or slice them into rounds and freeze those rounds spread out flat on a tray before transferring them to a bag once they're solid, which keeps every piece separate instead of clumping into one solid frozen block you'd have to hack apart with a knife later on. Frozen this way, properly peeled and sealed up tight against the air, those bananas will keep perfectly well for a full month, and a good deal longer besides, ready and waiting whenever a recipe calls for them, sitting there in your freezer like a little bit of insurance against waste. Patient and unhurried in a way fresh bananas simply never manage to be. I like to keep mine in a single labeled bag rather than scattered across several smaller ones, so I always know at a glance exactly how many I've got tucked away and whether it's time to start thinking about a fresh loaf of bread before that bag runs empty on me, rather than discovering an empty freezer shelf right when a craving strikes on a lazy Sunday afternoon. Those frozen bananas aren't just sitting there taking up space either. They're some of the most useful things you can have tucked away in your freezer, worth the small bit of effort it takes to peel and bag them properly. Drop a few frozen chunks straight into a blender with a splash of milk for a thick, creamy smoothie that needs no ice at all, since the frozen banana does that work all on its own, coming out thick as soft serve if you use enough of it. Or let a couple thaw just partway on the counter and mash them straight into a bowl for banana bread. The very best use I know of for bananas that have gone a bit too far for eating plain. Since the riper and softer a banana gets, the sweeter and more flavorful it turns out to be baked into a loaf, turning what looks like spoiled fruit into the very best part of the whole recipe. Beyond bread and smoothies, I've stirred thawed, mashed banana into a bowl of morning oatmeal for a natural bit of sweetness, without reaching for the sugar bowl at all. And I've blended frozen chunks all on their own, nothing else added, into a surprisingly good stand-in for ice cream on a hot afternoon. The kind of simple treat my grandchildren ask for by name whenever they're visiting. And the weather's turned warm. I keep a running bag in my freezer at all times now, adding to it whenever a banana starts slipping past its prime, rather than letting it sit there going to waste. And I've never once had to throw a spoiled banana in the trash since I started following this whole system from start to finish. Not once in all these years. Now, let me walk you through the whole thing again, quickly, so you've got it clear in your mind from start to finish. All 4 stages laid out plain and simple the way I think of them myself, whenever a fresh bunch comes into my kitchen. The moment your bananas come home, separate them from the bunch and wrap each stem snugly in a bit of plastic wrap. Then store them somewhere cool and shaded, well away from apples, avocados, and tomatoes sitting nearby on your counter. Check on them every couple of days through that first and second week, pulling any ripe ones away from the greener stalk the moment they've turned fully yellow, keeping that ripening gas from spreading where you don't want it. Once a banana reaches that perfect ripeness you're after, move it into the refrigerator And don't let that darkened skin fool you into thinking it's gone bad, since the fruit inside stays just as sweet as ever, no matter how dark and unappetizing the peel might look from the outside. And whenever a banana slips past the point where you'd want to eat it plain, peel it, freeze it, and tuck it away for smoothies or baking down the road, rather than letting it sit there going soft and eventually spoiling for real. Follow all 4 stages together, each one building naturally on the step before it, and I promise you, a whole bunch of bananas will carry you clean through a full month without a single one of them going to waste in your trash bin. Every last one of them put to good use one way or another, whether that's eaten fresh off the counter, pulled cold from the fridge, or blended straight from the freezer into something sweet. I do want to mention a little something about those brown spots that show up on a ripening banana, since I hear folks worry over them more than they ought to, tossing out perfectly good bananas at the first sign of a single speckle. Those spots aren't a sign anything's gone wrong. Quite the opposite, in fact. The very opposite of what most people assume the moment they spot one. As a banana ripens, its starches slowly convert over into sugars. And that process is exactly what those brown speckles are showing you happening, right there on the surface. A sign the banana underneath is growing sweeter and more flavorful by the day, rather than a sign of spoiling or going bad on you. A banana with a good scattering of brown spots across an otherwise yellow skin is very often at its very sweetest point. Better suited for eating plain or baking than a banana that's still a solid, unspotted yellow with hardly any character to its flavor at all. Don't let those spots scare you into tossing a banana out before it's time, since you'd be throwing away the very peak of its flavor right along with it, missing out on the banana at its absolute best. Now, this whole method is built around patience, slowing things down and stretching a bunch of bananas out over a full month. But I know good and well that sometimes you find yourself in the opposite situation entirely, standing there with a bowl of bananas still too green and firm for the banana bread you'd planned to bake that very afternoon. If that ever happens to you, here's a little trick for speeding things along instead of slowing them down. Set your still green bananas, peel and all, right onto a baking sheet, and pop them into an oven heated to about 300 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 to 20 minutes, keeping an eye on them through the oven door rather than walking away entirely. The peel will turn black and look positively alarming by the time you pull it out. And I'll warn you now so it doesn't catch you off guard the first time you try it, but underneath that blackened skin, the banana itself will have turned soft, sweet, and perfectly ripe, ready to mash straight into your batter that same afternoon, instead of waiting the better part of a week for it to happen on its own, out on the counter. Let them cool for a few minutes once they come out, since that skin traps a good deal of heat. And then split the peel open and scoop the soft fruit straight into your mixing bowl the same way you would any other ripe banana. It's not a trick I use often, since I'd rather let nature take its course when I've got the time to spare, letting a banana ripen at its own honest pace the way it's meant to. But it's a fine little emergency measure to keep tucked away in the back of your mind for the day you need a ripe banana in a hurry and simply haven't got a week to wait around for one. I'll leave you with one more little trick before we finish up today, and it's one that surprised even me the first time I tried it, years after I'd already been using the banana version for longer than I care to admit. That very same stem wrapping trick we talked about back in stage 1 works just as well on other fruit sitting in your kitchen, not bananas alone. And it's well worth trying the next time you find yourself with a piece of fruit you're not quite ready to use. Wrap the stem end of an avocado in a bit of plastic wrap, the same way we wrap those banana stems. And you'll slow its ripening down noticeably too. Buying yourself a few extra days before it turns from rock hard to overripe and mushy without ever passing through that perfect moment in between when you actually wanted to eat it. For anyone who's ever bought an avocado only to have it turn on them within a single afternoon, going from too firm to slice to too soft to save almost overnight, this is a real blessing indeed. And it costs you nothing more than the same small scrap of plastic wrap you'd use on a banana. It works to some degree on a few other stemmed fruits as well, mangoes and pears among them. So once you've gotten the hang of it with your bananas, don't be afraid to put that same little trick to work elsewhere around your kitchen. Wherever you find yourself wishing a piece of fruit would simply slow down and wait for you a little while longer, before it turns from perfect to past its prime, in what feels like the blink of an eye. So there you have it, my mother's whole method for keeping a bunch of bananas fresh and useful clean through an entire month. Broken down stage by stage the way I've come to think of it after all these years of using it myself. Ever since that day, my husband looked at 4 whole bunches spread across the table and asked me what on earth I was planning to do with them all. Separate and wrap the stems the moment they come home. Keep them away from other ripening fruit. Watch closely and pull the ripe ones aside as they come. Move them to the fridge once they've peaked. And freeze whatever slips past its prime for baking and smoothies down the road, letting nothing go to waste along the way. It's nothing more complicated than understanding what a banana actually needs at each stage of its life, and giving it exactly that. No fancy gadgets required. Nothing but a bit of plastic wrap, a spot in your pantry, and a corner of your freezer that was probably sitting empty anyway. I answered my husband that afternoon by telling him not to worry, that not a single one of those bananas would go to waste. And I'm proud to say I kept that promise clean through to the very last one, right down to the loaf of banana bread we finished off together a full month later. Still warm from the oven, and every bit as good as if I'd bought those bananas fresh that very same morning. I'd love to hear if you give this a try yourself. So come back and tell me down in the comments how long your own bunch of bananas managed to last. And don't be shy about telling me if you learned something new today about that stem wrapping trick, since it's the one piece of this whole method that surprises folks more than any other part of it, myself included when I first learned it from my own mother, standing in her kitchen all those years ago. I'm Grandma Ruth. Thank you for listening to Grandma Knows Best.